Hello, this is Jamie of the Druid Diaries, and I want to talk to you about Samhain in a different context than I've seen in most of the videos online. Yesterday was October 31st, Halloween. A lot of people I'm finding online, and in general, face-to-face people, are thinking that Samhain is one day, and that day is on October 31st, Halloween. Halloween can be a wonderful, playful, cathartic experience, and it should be a secular experience. And I would hope that everyone participates in Halloween in a good way, in that playful, cathartic way, to do no harm to anyone else or themselves, and to explore their fears safely and address that, and yet have a nice time, a creative time, a fun time, dressing up and really just enjoying each other's company. It's a wonderful time. I have very fond memories of Halloween as a child, and of the Halloweens that I took my children through. You know, the creativity and fun of figuring out what costumes you're going to wear, and going door to door and seeing all the wonderful costumes of the other children and adults and teenagers. And I don't see anything wrong with teenagers participating in Halloween. They need something fun to do too. They are very creative people, teenagers, and it gives them a chance to express that creativity in a good way. So long as they're being nice and maybe even playing a bit of a role for watching out for the little guys. Now, having said that, there are still a lot of people that believe in All Hallows Eve, which is a Christian version of the original Samhain, though the churches, the clergy in the churches, might not be readily willing to discuss that. So, let's talk about Samhain and the moon. The 31st was a date that was chosen for reasons that had nothing to do with the original Samhain. That's more about the Christian church. So, dig deeper. The last quarter, the waning of the moon. We're moving towards the new moon. Now, in the last quarter, if you were planting a field, and I know it's not for this time of year necessarily, unless you're planting peas or perhaps spinach for next spring, for this coming spring, but that last quarter is a rest period. It's a time to cultivate the soil, replenish the soil, add your fertilizer. And by fertilizer, I do mean compost and natural goodies for the soil, so that it's a good, healthy, living soil. That sort of thing. So then we get to the new moon, where the moon is completely covered in shadow. That's a time when gravity plays a part. The gravitational pull of the moon upon the earth, the elements of the earth, the water, tides, moisture in the soil, or gravity from the moon is pulling up moisture to those beautiful little seeds. Now this is, the waning of the day time of year. And I guess it's kind of funny in a way that playing with my computer mouse to keep the light on my face reminds me a little bit of the lunar cycle that we're in. Anyway, back to it. All right, so we're moving towards the new moon. Now, from this point, we're also getting closer to the winter solstice. So I want you to kind of look at three things here. When is the beginning of the Celtic day? It's dusk. Parallel that to the waning of the moon. When is the beginning of the Celtic day? When we move into the night. Think of the shadow upon the new moon, the darkness covering the moon. All right? Now think about the year, the cycle of the year, the summer, the winter. the winter solstice, the summer solstice. Let's kind of keep it to moving from light to dark, because that's the direction we're going in the year. So summer solstice, winter solstice, day, night, full moon, new moon. And then you have the transitions in between. So Samhain, okay, summer moving into winter is light moving into darkness. At Samhain and the cycle of the waning moon moving into the new moon. We're right at that beautiful point. Not talking about the autumnal equinox. We're directly in between that autumnal equinox and the winter solstice now. So those various qualities very much relate to Samhain. The harvest, the culling of the herds, the preservation of the breeding stock to be protected for the winter. The people in ancient times couldn't necessarily keep a whole herd alive for the winter. They needed food. They needed that food preserved and stored, and they needed to feed and keep healthy their breeding stock for the spring to grow their herds again. So how big those herds are and everything, I don't have any idea. I imagine that's something that's pretty variable. But let's stick to it here. Look at the movement between light and dark as a transition from end to beginning. A lot of times we just think of Samhain in regards to death. Yes, that's logical. We're moving into winter. The land in the northern hemisphere is going to sleep. There is a tremendous die-off of plants that have already seeded for next year, and their lives are past. John Barleycorn, okay, is one. The famous song. Listen to that song, and it's teaching. John Barleycorn is a plant. Okay, he represents the fields that have been grown and hopefully have flourished over the year, being harvested, and then those grains preserved, perhaps used at the time, but for large part preserved until those crops can come again. I think we sometimes forget about the really powerful ties to survival, to being able to have food, that these amazing cycles in the wheel of the year are attuned to. They are attuned to the cycles of the earth, the moon, the sun, how we interact throughout a full circle, when we go around the sun. Yes, I do believe we're going around the sun. And the constellations, the change in the positions of the constellations, at least how we see it, because we've moved. So we see a different angle to those constellations. So, again, we're going to sleep right now. The bears are getting ready to hibernate for the winter. They've put on their winter fat. They're settling into their dens, soon enough. And we can imagine in ancient times, we've stored away a lot of food, we hope, because we hope it was a very fruitful summer. And this being the last sort of period of harvest and the preservation of that food to help get us through who knows what kind of winter. It could be very, very tough. The dark period of the year is hard on the elderly. It's hard on little wee ones, children, and pregnant women, especially if you're thinking in ancient times or those in poverty. These are difficult times for them to go through the winter. And a lot of people today are very aware of a seasonal disorder where we get, a little depressed around this time of year. We don't feel so good because we're losing that contact with that strong sunshine from the beautiful sacred sun. So look at all these elements. So at Samhain, we honor our ancestors. We honor and give support to individuals in community who have lost someone during that previous year that's now ending. It's a chance for community healing, community support for the bereaved. That's really, really important. But just as we move into the darkness of death and sleep, that darkness becomes a womb of rebirth. Look at the land. Seeds have already been sown. Seeds don't only get sown in the spring. Wild plants will seed in the fall, what we call the fall, or throughout the end of summer. We see milkweed pods here, and the milkweed plant itself takes a while to drain all its strength from the stems and the pods to dry and to pop, and then for these beautiful silks attached to the seeds to really fully break free of the pods. And they're still attached, many of them. So some of them have already gone to the ground. They've already had layers of moisture. Some are digging their way into the mud. And yet more still have time to go into the soil at various points throughout this time. So plants are seeding. They're falling to the earth, their womb. That is going to be their womb until they burst forth in the spring. Animals have already conceived in some cases, or will conceive during the winter, the dark months. So life is taking hold. And whatever that gestation period is, we hope it's going to come to fruit at a point that's going to allow the offspring to live. And I am not totally aware of all these different cycles and all the different animals, so please forgive me if I am not really on top of that. However, I think you get the idea of this waning of the light, of death, of sleep, and then rebirth from within the darkness to the light. So, Samhain, for me, begins with the last quarter, the waning moon, and ends when the new moon cracks that beautiful sliver of light into the first quarter. That, for me, is a full Samhain, from the 31st of October to the 7th of November. Isn't that not beautiful? And guess what? Guess what starts in the darkness and opens up into the light? Diwali, Festival of Lights. There are a lot of parallels, a lot of connections between the festival, the period of rituals and doings of Samhain and Diwali. They're not the same, they are different, but they are very much tied to exactly the same things. That is worth exploring, and I encourage you, if you are able to go and experience a Diwali festival if you're able. It's beautiful, and so is Samhain. Samhain is an opportunity for community to support bereaved persons within the community, a gathering of people. But if you don't feel you have that, then by all means, light a candle, burn some incense, a smudge. Help yourselves to heal if you've lost someone. Help a friend who's lost someone. Whatever that way is for you, this is that time of year to do that. You may or may not know your ancestral line, or you may know it partially. You may not like people in your immediate family. You may not have had really healthy relationships with your parents. Life can be hard. Ideals are, well, they're dreams that we strive for. We're all human beings. Sometimes we don't realize how much we might really truly love a parent or grandparent until they are gone. And sometimes, many years later, you might suddenly realize that nasty grandparent that you thought didn't love you really did care for you deeply. So, what about your ancestors? They're individuals. If you met them in person, you might love them. You might dislike them intensely. You may not want to know them. But they are in you. So in order to really truly love yourself, there has to be some unconditional love for all of your ancestors, all of your line. Doesn't matter whether you're adopted, doesn't matter whether that's a complete mystery. You can do it without knowing those things. Great if you can find out, but who's to say which one of those two ways is more challenging? The point is that at Samhain, honor them, send them love, put out offerings for them from your meal. And do that in an environmentally gentle way, please. No styrofoam plates. Only things that are safe for the environment, please. That's important because we're also honoring not only our ancestors, but all of those who have gone before us. They sustain life on this planet. Right? The soil we walk on, it comes from death. It brings life. It itself has a life and has communities. Appreciate this cycle we are in. This is the dusk of the year, and we are going to move into the night, and the womb and the dawn will come. Have a beautiful Samhain, and don't stop thinking about it. We still have to the 7th of November.